Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Let's Translate Light Novels. This is part of a series, so if you're new to this series, I suggest starting at episode 1, but if you can stick around if you want, that's fine too. Just check out the video description for some information, disclaimers, credits, etc. Let's just jump right into it. And I apologize in advance for the kids that are in the apartment above me, stomping and making a bunch of noise. I cannot do anything about that. There's just going to be some clunking noises occasionally in this audio, and that's what it is. Yay. Alright, so we have some narration. 苦闘の子供らにばったり出くわし、先ほどのような仕打ちを受けるのは何も今日に始まったことではなかった。That's one sentence. Next sentence. それは子供ばかりではない。And then the last sentence in this section. 大人たちとて同じことだった。So, 苦闘 the country, 子供ら the kids. ばったり出くわし. This is like bump into. 先ほどのような. So, 先ほどのような仕打ち. So, like bad things. Shiuchi is like a thing that you do to somebody. It's one of those words that like I know what it means, but I don't know what it means in English. Let's just look that up real quick. Looking up words is good, even if you know what they mean. Treatment. Yeah, that's how you would translate it. Or like an act or a behavior. Yeah. But it's like, it's usually bad treatment, like shiuchi. Yeah, like cruel treatment or something. Anyway, so cruel treatment, the likes of which they had just experienced, basically, 先ほどのような仕打ちを受けるのは, and usually, yeah, 仕打ちを受ける to like receive bad treatment. 何も今日に始まったことではなかった. So it's like, today was not the first time that this has happened. Like, this was nothing new. それは子供ばかりではない. And it was not just kids that did this to them, basically. 大人たちとて同じことだった. So, like, adults treated them the same way. So, patron A. For this video and for the next video, you probably saw it in the title or the thumbnail because I probably made a big deal out of it because it's rather unique. This time we have translations from 3 different translators. One of the translators is one of the patrons who has been translating this series from the very beginning. Another one of the translators is who I'm calling Small Sarah, which is basically me when I was 18 years old and I was about 4 to 5 months into my year in Japan and I had only had 2 years of high school Japanese. So I was like, I'd say intermediate level Japanese and a very, very novice level translator. This is like one of the first things I ever translated on my own, just for funsies. But then we have a new translator in this video and next video this month who is actually a professional manga translator. This translator has never professionally translated light novels, but they are interested in it. But yeah, we have I'd say an advanced learner and like a beginning, maybe intermediate level, like learner of translation. We have me from the past, who is a novice translator and intermediate level Japanese learner, and then we have a professional. So it's going to be a pretty cool mix. Anyway, patron A is the person who has been translating with this series all along. So by now they're actually relatively experienced, at least working on this light novel. And they're an advanced Japanese learner. So patron A's translation was, it wasn't the first time they bumped into Kuto children and received that kind of abuse. Abuse is a great translation for shiuchi o ukeru. Yeah, shiuchi, abuse. Let's call it what it is. And it wasn't just children. Grown adults hurt them too. I like how patron A combines some of the sentences. Sometimes, like, Japanese prose is weird. Sometimes the sentences are super, super, super long and run-on-y, especially when you have, like, words describing a noun, like, the man who was sitting on the bench who was old and had long hair and was reading a book. Like, a lot of Japanese sentences will be very run-on-y like that. They'll use, like, a bunch of words and phrases to describe the subject of the sentence, like the man sitting on the bench in that example. And sometimes you have to like shorten those sentences or cut them up. And also in Japanese prose, sometimes they have very short sentences that like really would do better to be combined with other sentences. Like in English, if you have like a lot of short sentences too much, like, there was a man, period. He was sitting on a bench, period. He was reading a book, period. He had long hair, period. If it's like that in English prose, it sounds like an 8-year-old child wrote it, right? If you have like too many short sentences like that. In Japanese, these rules they don't apply the same as they do in English. It's not necessarily as like jarring, I guess, to see a bunch of short sentences, or to see a very, very long sentence. Keep that in mind when you see sentence lengths. You can play with them. You can make them shorter, and you can make them longer, and you can combine them, and you can split them up. But yeah, I liked translating shiuchi as abuse, and I like how concise everything is. I feel like the Japanese version was a little wordier, and patron A tightened everything up, which is nice. It's not necessary, but it's nice to be able to do that. And now we have an airplane flying overhead. Yep. I live in an amazing environment for recording audio. Okay, patron B. So this is the professional translator. From now on, I'm just going to refer to these people as patron A and patron B. But patron B, the run-in just now with the children from Kuto was a far cry from being the first they had experienced. On top of that, it wasn't only children who had treated them badly. Even adults acted toward them like that. So just note, like, ignore the Japanese and just look at these sentences. Like, it's written well. It's like, it looks like it was originally written in English. It reads well. Like, I really do feel like I'm reading a story that a narrator has written. The run-in for, I guess, shiuchi o ukeru. Notice how, like, it wasn't literally translated so much. Like, patron A chose abuse, which I think was a great choice. Based off of what the children were like screaming insults at them and throwing rocks at them. I mean, that's abuse. But the run-in also describes what it is. It's a little softer, but it also works. A far cry from being the first. I like the far cry. Nanimo kyou ni hajimatta koto. It's like the nanimo is being expressed as it's a far cry from being the first they had experienced. And then on top of that, it wasn't only children who had treated them badly, even adults acted toward them like that. So the bakari de wa nai was expressed as on top of that, it wasn't only children who had treated them that way. And patron B kept this as 3 sentences, but by like expanding and wording things a little bit more wordily, it isn't as awkward. It isn't as like sentence, sentence, sentence. It flows better. So note those 2 very different translations that are both good. Now small Sarah, the kind of behavior he had shown towards the Kuto bullies, nope, that's wrong, was not the first time he had acted that way, but it was definitely not just the act of a child. Adults did the same. Yeah, so small Sarah got confused on who was performing the actions. She thought that sakihodo no yona shiuchi o ukeru, she thought that like that the narrator is talking about Ayuru, the way Ayuru had treated the bullies, but no, that's not at all what it was. It was the way the bullies treated the kids. Now, if you caught that mistake and changed it, and like the kind of behavior the bullies had shown towards Ayuru was not the first time they had acted that way, but it was definitely not just the act of a child. Adults did the same. It's still worded kind of weird. It was definitely not just the act of a child. It's more describing, like, the kind of action that was done. Like, it was definitely not just the act of a child. Like, if you think of childlike abuse, it's like, oh yeah, going neener, neener, neener. And it's like, well, it wasn't just the act of a child. It wasn't just childlike abuse. It was more hardcore. I think that's kind of how small Sarah was thinking this was. Yeah, but this is wrong. Yay! Nice effort, small Sarah. Next passage. Kuto no tami wa dare mo jibun tachi ni mukai, marude obutsu o miru yona sagesumi no shisen wo yokoshita. That's one sentence. Lots of big words there, which we'll go over. Next sentence. Naka ni wa zankoku na kodomo to onajiku tsuba wo hakikake ishi wo nageru mono made ita. All right, so again, Kuto no tami, again, that's the people of Kuto. Daremo, so anybody. Jibun tachi ni mukai marude Also, jibun tachi ni mukai, it's like towards us, towards themselves. Jibun, so nice and vague. I love you, Jibun. So this is kind of like Ayuru. It's talking about Ayuru. So jibun tachi in this case is Ayuru and his kind, the hin. Maru de obutsu o miru yona. So obutsu, if you look at the kanji, it's actually pretty elementary level kanji, I think. It's kitanai and mono together. So literally dirty thing. So, filth, basically. Sagesumi no shisen. So sagesumi, contempt or scorn, basically. Yeah, so sagesumi no shisen would be like a look of scorn, or to stare daggers at. Well, stare daggers isn't quite right, but yeah, like you're looking upon them with scornfully as if they were filth, is what that phrase means. Nakani wa, among them, zankoku na kodomo to onajiku, so just like the cruel kids, parentheses that they just encountered, tsuba o hakikake, so tsuba is spit, so, spitting at them, ishi o nageru, throwing stones. Mono, in this case, the mono, if you look at that kanji, it's a person or people. Made ita, so there were even people who spat at them and threw stones at them, just like the cruel kids that they had just encountered. So it's pretty much anyone in Kuto, all the people of Kuto, looked upon the hin with scorn and contempt like they were filth. And among them, there were even people who spat and threw rocks, just like the cruel kids that they had just encountered. So Patron A translated that as, the citizens of Kuto gave them looks of contempt and disgust, like they were looking at filth. Some even spat and threw stones at them, like cruel children. I would say like the cruel children. I don't know, because I think it's pretty clear the narrator's talking about just like the cruel children that they had just faced, not just like cruel children in general. Yeah, and that's a correct translation, and it reads pretty well. Patron B, the stares of every person from Kuto constantly fell upon them as if they were filth to be scorned. I like that filth to be scorned phrasing there. Because Patron A, looks of contempt and disgust, like they were looking at filth, reads one way, which it's not wrong. That's one way. And then the other way is combining those as filth to be scorned. Constantly fell upon them. It wasn't explicitly said that it was constant. But, if everybody in Kuto is doing this, it's going to be pretty much constant. There were even some who acted like those merciless children who spit on them or threw rocks. Yeah, so Patron B is explicitly referencing those merciless children earlier who spat at them and threw rocks. Let's see. Small Sarah. Whenever anyone looked upon them, it was always with a look of scorn and disgust. Note how look is used twice here. It's just kind of redundant sounding. Just the same as those cruel boys, people would throw stones at them. And then there's a comma here because Small Sarah continued the next sentence she combined them into one sentence. So the comma is not wrong. It's just Small Sarah did not end the sentence there. Whenever anyone looked upon them, I think it's important to say whenever anyone from Kuto looked upon them, it was always with a look of scorn. Yeah, it was always with scorn and disgust, or a look. Oh, and she had a typo, a look or scorn and disgust. I didn't even catch that just now. I fixed it with my brain. That's why editors are amazing. Okay, so yeah, note how look is redundant there. And it did need Kuto, whenever anyone of Kuto. Just the same as those cruel boys, people would throw stones at them. That works. Stones, I don't know, stones sound smoother to me than rocks. Throwing rocks at them sounds more violent than stones. Although then again, there is the phrase to stone people. But yeah, I prefer throw rocks. Patron A also went with stones. Alright, next passage. しかし、どんな目で見られようと、どんなことをされようとも、いつも、ellipses, いつも、long ellipses, 黙って耐えることしかできないのだ。So, しかし, however, どんな目で見られようと, so no matter how anyone looked at them, this is passive voice, so no matter how they were looked at, by other people. どんなことをされようとも, and no matter how they were treated by other people. So if you were to rephrase this as active voice, it would be no matter how anyone stared at them or perceived them or looked at them, no matter how anyone treated them, or no matter what anyone did to them. いつも, always, always. 黙って耐えること. So to like grit your teeth and bear it, to shut up and just like take it, to be quiet and endure is like literally what that means. ことしかできない. So that's the only thing that they could do. No matter how they were treated, no matter how anyone looked at them, all they could do was be quiet and bear it. Patron A translated that as a thought by Ayuru. I do not think this is Ayuru thinking. I think this is the narrator, like kind of speaking on behalf of Ayuru. But Patron A decided to make this Ayuru's thoughts. But no matter how they look at me or what they do to me, I've always kept quiet about it. It's the only thing I can do, he thought. It's not so much that he kept quiet about it, it's that he doesn't say anything back at the abuse of people. Instead of yelling like Taria did, hey, don't do that, we're people of Kuto just like you, Ayuru would all he was ever able to do is just shut up and bear it and wait for them to stop throwing rocks at him. It's not, he didn't keep quiet about it. Like, everybody in his tribe knows, that they're abused by people of Kuto. It's the only thing I can do. I kind of like splitting that up. I've always kept quiet about it, though that's kind of a wrong translation. Period. It's the only thing I can do. It's more like it's the only thing I've been able to do. It's the only thing I could do. The only thing I can do sounds better, though, he thought. But again, this isn't even Ayuru thinking. It's just the narrator, like, talking about Ayuru. Patron B, yet. I like yet for shikashi, actually. I really do like that. I have to keep remembering that yet is a really good way of translating words like, shikashi. No matter how they were targeted or looked down upon. Every time, every single time, there was nothing they could do but shut up and take the abuse. I like how it's like every time, every single time. In Japanese, it doesn't sound as weird to be like itsumo, to like repeat that. But in English, if you repeat something, you usually will expand upon it. Like you would say forever and ever instead of just forever, forever. Or like you wouldn't say always, always. You would say always and forever. Or you'd say never ever instead of never never. And like this, instead of saying always always, which is literally what this is, itsumo itsumo, every time, every single time, it makes it flow better. It gives it a little more like emphasis, and it just sounds better. Like, I don't know how else to describe it, except it just sounds better to do stuff like that. There was nothing, it just adds more emphasis. There was nothing they could do but shut up and take the abuse. Note how you can phrase it as like, the only thing that they could do is shut up and take the abuse. And you can also phrase it as there was nothing they could do but or except shut up and take the abuse. I like shut up and take the abuse. Like, keep quiet doesn't sound as mean, I guess. But it's like when you phrase it as like shut up and take the abuse, you can kind of almost imagine like they're telling themselves to shut up. Like, I know you feel like yelling at those boys, they're throwing rocks at you, but shut up, let it go. Otherwise, it's only going to make it worse. It makes the whole thing a little more emotional. Small Sarah. But no matter, okay, and remember, this is like a continuation of the sentence before. But no matter how they wanted to retaliate, ooh, I like retaliate, all they could do was quietly take the torment. So small Sarah, like, maybe she skipped this and just kind of missed it. But she kind of just deleted the whole, like, no matter how they were looked at or treated. And instead, she kind of added, but no matter how they wanted to retaliate, all they could do was quietly take the torment. I kind of like quietly take the torment. That's actually, like, nicely worded and everything. It's missing a little bit, but I actually like how it's worded. It reads well in English. All right, so let's move on to the next narration. そんな自分が悔しくて恥ずかしくて、アユルはこぼれそうになる涙を必死でこらえた。 So, そんな自分が悔しくて. So, like, そんな自分. So, that kind of oneself is like literally what that means. So again, 自分 in this case is Ayuru. So, そんな自分, the そんな is describing what Nishizaki Megumi, the author, was like saying in the last few sentences. そんな自分. The 自分, the Ayuru that could only like shut up and take the abuse, no matter how he was treated, by, you know, the scornful citizens of Kuto who spat on him and threw rocks at him. That 自分, that Ayuru, が悔しくて. So 悔しい, oh my, what a lovely word. It kind of means vexed. I know it's not a word that we very commonly use in modern English, but yeah, it's like he hated himself. 自分が悔しくて. He was so frustrated at himself. I kind of like in this case, he hated himself for being like that. そんな自分が悔しくて. He hated himself for being like that. 恥ずかしくて. He was also ashamed of himself for being like that. Ayuru はこぼれそうになる涙を必死でこらえた. So Ayuru, like with all his might, 必死で, こぼれそうになる涙, the tears that were about to spill out of his eyes, and then こらえた, like he, with all of his might, Ayuru managed, Ayuru forced the tears back into his eyes, the tears which were about to spill out of his eyes, basically. Because he hated himself and he was so ashamed of himself for being that way. So, patron A, feeling disappointed and ashamed of himself, Ayuru fought back the tears that were about to spill over. I don't know that you really need feeling, just disappointed and ashamed of himself, comma, Ayuru fought back the tears that were about to spill over. Disappointed is a little soft, I think. Kuyashi is a bit stronger than just disappointed. But yeah, I mean, this is fine. Patron B, it was a wretched, humiliating existence, and Ayuru had to try as hard as he could to hold back tears. I really like wretched, actually, for kuyashi. I'll have to remember that. That's another word that, like, we don't really use in modern English. But yeah, like, if you say, like, I feel so wretched, like, words could not describe how wretched he felt then. That word wretched does like mean like you hate yourself. You feel just like you're your most horrible person in the world. I like wretched. Humiliating also for hatsukashi. It's like often you can translate hatsukashi as embarrassed, but notice how words like frustrated and embarrassed aren't as strong as what Ayuru really is feeling here. He's been enduring this abuse his entire life, and he's been humiliated and he feels wretched, like he hates himself. So these words are really good choices for kuyashi and hatsukashi. And I really like, it was a wretched, humiliating existence. I really like that wording. What I question a little bit, and Ayuru had to try as hard as he could to hold back tears, this implies more that, like, just in general, Ayuru had to try as hard as he could to hold back tears. And it's probably true, like, in general, Ayuru had to try as hard as he could to hold back his tears. But in this particular passage, we are sort of segueing back into, like, Nishizaki Megumi was, in the past few sentences, speaking kind of more generally and giving you backstory about how the kids were abused and the heen were abused. But now we're slipping into describing Ayuru right now, in the present, like right now, after this particular run-in, he's trying to hold back his tears. So while it's true that Ayuru had to try as hard as he could to hold back the tears in general, the way it's worded here, it doesn't, it sounds like the narrator's only speaking in general terms about Ayuru, when I think the narrator's actually, like, bringing you back into the scene right now and saying, like, well, now Ayuru had to try as hard as he could to hold back tears. Do you see what I mean? It's like, it's not wrong at all. It just, the way it's worded here with it was a wretched, humiliating existence, which is great wording, it still is speaking a bit more generally when I don't think the author was originally speaking in general terms there. Small Sarah. Because of this, Ayuru thought himself to be pathetic, was embarrassed, and had cried so hard. Yeah, so small Sarah also was speaking a little more in general terms here. And notice how it's right? It's correct. This is a correct translation, but it just sounds dumb. It's like no other way to express it. It just sounds dumb because of this. Ayuru thought himself to be pathetic. It's so, like, matter of fact. Ayuru thought himself to be pathetic. Like, where's the raw emotion, small Sarah? Was embarrassed. And just doesn't sound, yeah. And had cried so hard. Yeah, it's not even had cried so hard. Like, he was, like, it took everything in him to prevent himself from crying, is more what that was. Nice try, small Sarah. Next line. Hey, we're finally into some dialogue. Ayuru wa ikuji nashi nanka janai. Taria wa shounen no te o nigitta. So, no, remember in the last episode how Ayuru said, boku wa ikuji nashi da? Or nanda? I forget exactly how he phrased that. And one of the patrons who translated that said, okay, I'm pretty sure this is a pretty, like, important thing he's saying here. And that patron wasn't exactly sure the best way to translate ikuji nashi. So Ayuru is said, hey, I am ikuji nashi. And now Talia is saying, you are not ikuji nashi. Nanka janai, like, you're not ikuji nashi or anything of the sort. Or ikuji nashi, poppycock. You're not that. And then she gripped his hand, basically. So patron A, Ayuru, you're not a wimp at all. Talia reassured him and put her hands in his. Reassured him, to me when I hear that, doesn't go so well with, like, shouting. Like, she's shouting at him. Ayuru wa ikuji nashi nanka janai. Like, there's an exclamation point. She's, like, yelling at him. It's more like she's saying, like, shut up, Ayuru, you're not ikuji nashi. It's like, listen to me, man. Reassured him sounds a little softer than that. It's not wrong. And, like, she is reassuring him, but just to me it makes it sound soft. And put her hands in his, I think it's more she gripped his hands. Like, if she put her hands in his, he has to be actively gripping her hands, and if he's being, like, if he's hating himself right now over how wimpy he is, I don't know how receptive he's going to be to, like, a gentle touch. That's pretty nitpicky, but yeah, like, I picture this as more she yells at him, like, shut up, Ayuru, you're brave, kind of thing, and, like, grabs his hands and, like, look at me, kind of feeling to this. Let's see, patron B. I don't care what they say. You're not a gutless coward, Ayuru. Taria squeezed his hand. So yeah, note how, like, te, we don't know if it's one of his hands or both of his hands. I kind of like both of his hands. Like, I like that image of her grabbing both of his hands. Because that's the kind of action you would do if you're like, stay with me, boy! Or like, listen to me, boy! I'd imagine grabbing both of the hands more. But, you know, you get to make that choice because Japanese doesn't have plurals. I like squeezed for nigitta. And yeah, you don't need to say, like, Taria said or Taria reassured him. Not all dialogue tags have to have a verb that means said, basically. You can just end it with a period or an exclamation point in this case instead of a comma and just follow it up with a sentence that describes what the character is, like, doing along with saying that line. I don't care what they say. You're not a gutless coward, Ayuru. Note how in the Japanese they did not say, like, hoka no hito wa, like, nani o you mo kankei nai. Like, she didn't say literally in Japanese, I don't care what they say. But I think nanka is kind of doing that. Because nanka is sort of like a word that you add after a word that scoffs that word. Like, you could almost translate this as, Ayuru wa ikuji nashi, and replace the nanka with, like, an exclamation point and a question mark and quotes around Ayuru wa ikuji nashi. It's like, Ayuru is a coward? No, that's not true. Like, you could almost think of it that way as when you translate it. So I don't care what they say, you're not a gutless coward, Ayuru. That does work. It's not like this patron wasn't making stuff up. Like, it is there in the subtext of that line. And then gutless coward for ikuji nashi. I kind of like that. Like, ikuji nashi can just be translated as coward, or wimp, or weakling. But I do like gutless coward, because it kind of covers both bases. It means, like, a wimpy, wimpy coward. All right, small Sarah, how did you do? Ayuru, you aren't weak at all, Taria squeezed the boy's hand. So very, like, simple. There's not as much emotionality there. Like, I don't care what they say, you're not a gutless coward, Ayuru. Finishing it with his name also, going back to patron B, usually you may notice in Japanese it's more common for them to start a sentence with a character's name. Like Ayuru something something something, versus in English it's more common to go something 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 Ayuru. That's just another thing to look out for when you're translating. Like, it's usually better to end the line with the person's name, or to put the person's name, like, in the middle of the line. I don't care what they say, comma, Ayuru, you're not a gutless coward. Like, you could also do that. But yeah, it's usually a little more unnatural to start a sentence with a character's name. You aren't weak at all, so I guess Small Sarah translated it as just weak. Oh, right! Small Sarah translated it as, I'm just a weak boy, which was an interesting choice. Okay, yeah, you aren't weak at all. That's fine. Taria squeezed the boy's hand. Again, it's missing some of the emotionality and urgency, but it's fine. It's correct, technically. All right, more Taria. This is a very, very long line that Taria is about to say, and I'm going to split it up into 3 different sections, and then that'll be the end of this episode. So, Taria is going to give an emotionally stirring speech. Keep this in mind. 私たちは何も悪いことなんかしていない。Period. 差別されることなんか何もない。Period. 悪いのはあいつらなんだから。Alright, so 私たちは何も悪いことなんかしていない。So again, this なんか. It's like, doing bad things? Nope, we're not doing that. Or like, we're absolutely not doing anything wrong or bad. 差別される, to be like discriminated against, basically. Nanka, again, 何もない. We're being discriminated against for legitimate reasons. Poppycock! We're not doing anything that would justify people discriminating against us, is kind of what that means. Warui no wa, so she used warui earlier. Like, we're not warui. Warui no wa, the ones who are warui, aitsura nandakara. Now, aitsura is those people, them, but it's very, like, rude way of translating that. You could, like, use profanity even. You could say, those bastards. Honestly, I would probably go there and have her call them those bastards or something like that, just because, like, yeah, it adds more intensity and more emotionality to what she's saying. So, like, hey, listen, Ayuru, we did nothing wrong. There's absolutely no justification for the discrimination we're receiving. Those bastards are the ones who have done wrong things, basically. Patron A, listen, period. Ooh, I love that. I love starting it with just listen. Because again, she's about to say a very stirring speech to him. So I like beginning it with listen. She's like, I'm going to spit some facts, Ayuru. All of us, the Heens, we're not doing anything wrong. I like that. I like the use of commas and the short phrasing and the breaking things up like that. You can imagine her doing this. Like, if you're giving someone a stirring speech like this, and you're trying to spell things out for that person, and tell them why they're wrong, and, like, and try to give them a pep talk, you're gonna talk like that. You're gonna be like, all of us, the Heens, we're not doing anything wrong. It's like, that's the way you would talk. So I like that. There's no reason for us to be discriminated against. They're the ones who are wrong. I would have italicized there. They're the ones who are wrong. I like this. This is very good. Yeah, to be discriminated against is kind of weird wording, but in the moment right now, I can't really think of a better way to word that. Yep. And that's literally what it is in Japanese too. So, you know, it's one of those things that, like, if I were translating this professionally or whatever, I probably would, like, flag discriminated against those words and then just revisit it later and see if there's a better way that I could word that. Patron B, none of this is our fault. We haven't done anything to deserve being treated this way. They're the bad ones. I like we haven't done anything to deserve being treated this way. Yeah, that's kind of what was missing. Sabetsu sareru koto nanka nani mo nai. There's no justification for the discrimination that we face. We haven't done anything to deserve being treated this way. That works. They're the bad ones. And again, I would have italicized there. They're the bad ones. Yeah, the only other nitpicky thing I could say for this translation is, again, the word warui is repeated for a reason. She said, we are not warui, they are warui. If anyone is warui, it's them. So it it's usually a good idea in that case to translate wadui as the same way each time. But patron B translated it as fault the first time and bad the second time, whereas patron A translated it as wrong both times, which it adds that consistency to what she was saying there. Like, this isn't, patron B's translation is not wrong, and it is in fact good. It's missing that one little nuance of like, we're not the Wadui ones, Ayuru, they are the Wadui ones. Not patron, small Sarah. We didn't do anything wrong. There's no reason for us to be discriminated against. They're the ones who were bad. It's like, if small Sarah had just translated bad at the end as wrong, then this would be a pretty decent translation, and very, very similar to patron A's. Yeah, there's no reason for us to be discriminated against. We haven't done anything to deserve, I think is better. Yeah, and discriminated against is kind of weird. I really like how patron B just got rid of the whole sabetsu sararu and just deserve being treated this way. Yeah. Small Sarah, okay. Next part of Taria's stirring speech. お金持ちと貧乏人の差がどんどん広がって、みんな心がすさんでいるから、私たちに当たるんだって. So this だって at the end, she's kind of quoting someone else. It's like, they say, people are saying, I've heard, or like it could be read as that way, or it could be just for emphasis. It's like atarunda. The nda is being like emphatic. I'm telling you why it is this way, and then the te at the end can also mean like come on, listen to me. This is the reason why this is happening. So I'm not sure which it is, but you can decide for yourself what that te is doing here. So okane mochi to bimbonin, so the rich and the poor, no za, so the gap between the rich and the poor is dondon, gradually, hirogatte, spreading. So the gap between the rich and the poor is gradually increasing. Minna, everyone, kokoro ga susandeiru kara. Kokoro ga susamu is actually a pretty common phrase. They're overwhelmed, or their hearts have gotten hardened. They're losing empathy. They're becoming like bad people at heart because of the widening gap between the rich and the poor. Atashitachi ni atarun da. And so they take it out on us. Based, Taria. We are spitting facts, and I like it. Yes, this is my jam. Taria for president. Okay. So yeah, because of the widening gap between the rich and the poor, everyone's hearts are getting hardened, and they take it out on us. They scapegoat the heen, basically. And, you know, how often have we seen that happen? How often are we currently seeing that happening right now? Anyway, patron A translated that as, the gap between the rich and poor is getting bigger and bigger, and everyone is losing control of their hearts, so they take it out on us. Losing control of their hearts sounds a little weird. Like, it's accurate. It's like, it is what is happening. People are losing their hearts. People are losing their souls. People are losing their humanity. People are losing empathy. If you want to phrase it as like losing control of their hearts. It does sound a little weird. But it's correct. It's accurate. Patron B. They see the rich getting richer while they get poorer and poorer and lash out at us because they can. I like the lash out at us. For atashitachi ni ataru. Because they can was not literally in the Japanese, but it's true. They lash out at the heen because they can, because they have that sort of built-in excuse. They make a really good scapegoat because they're a minority group. I personally would not have put in because they can, but I don't think it's wrong. Like, I don't think it's a inaccurate extrapolation of this and of what's actually going on. Small Sarah, the gap between the rich and poor is slowly spreading. Sounds like a disease. Well, it is a disease. Capitalism is a disease. And everyone's hearts are growing wild. Oh, interesting. Growing wild. Maybe feral would have been better than wild. I don't know. That's a little too divorced from the original Japanese. So they strike against us. That's interesting. Weird wording, like they strike against us. That almost sounds like they're going on strike. Like boycott heen businesses. Yeah. I think small Sarah probably looked up ataru in the dictionary and like it can be translated as strike, like to strike gold or something. So they strike against us. Yeah, I think they take it out on us is a more correct one. And lash out I really like, because lash out adds more like emotionality and violence, and because there is violence happening. So I like lash out. Strike against us is weird. Small Sarah. All right, the last part of this video and the end of Comrade Ayuru's wonderful speech. だから何を言われようが堂々としていなさいって。あんな奴ら相手にするなって。So we got these tes again. 父さんや母さんから言われてるもん。だからあゆるは立派だったんだよ。Alright, so the small su followed by the te in this section, we're seeing that she's repeating things that her dad and her mom told her. So we can somewhat safely assume that the thing she said just before that might also be like something that her mom and dad have told her. And it seems like it would have been something that her mom and dad would have told her. It's like, is a 10-year-old gonna be that class conscious? I don't know, maybe, because she's part of a minority group that's oppressed. Maybe she would be that class conscious that she would understand about like gaps between rich and poor causing conflict in a society. But yeah, I think it's I am just assuming now, because of the tes in this passage, that the small tsu followed by the te in the last passage was something that she'd heard from her mom or her dad. So anyway, dakara, therefore, because of that, nani wo iwareyo ga, no matter what they say to us, no matter what we're told, passive voice, but no matter what they say to us, no matter what they tell us, doto to shite inasai te. So doto to, like to stand your ground, to be tall. Anna yatsura, we've got katakana yatsura this time, which makes it even rougher. Those bastards. Aite ni suru na. So don't take the bait, basically. Don't fight back. Don't even like honor them with a response. Don't feed the trolls. Tosa ya ka-san kara, so from dad and mom, iwareteru mon. So this mon at the end is, again, a very emphatic, like, that's what mom and dad have always told me. Or us, you know. They've told us we should always, when they go low, we go high. Their parents are liberals. It's like, no matter what they tell us, we should always, you know, be the bigger person and not fight back. That's what mom and dad have always told us, remember? Dakara, so therefore, you were rippa, Ayuru. You were not ikujinashi. You were, in fact, rippa. So rippa is another one of those words that's like pretty hard to translate. It can be translated many, many different ways. So rippa is sort of like you were grand, you were magnificent, you were like the perfect example of what you should be. You were brave. Yeah, it's like that's kind of what rippa means in this context, is like you were amazing, you were brave, you did exactly what you should have, you did the best that you could have. It's that kind of meaning there. So patron A translated that as, that's why my family tells me to keep standing tall and not deal with jerks like those boys, no matter what they say. Ayuru, you did a really brave thing. And again, I think that would be better if you did a really brave thing, Ayuru, instead of starting with Ayuru. That's why my family tells me to keep standing tall and not deal with jerks like those boys, no matter what they say. It's more like she's kind of like telling Ayuru, it's like, so you need to stand tall and not deal with jerks, no matter what they say. Like, that's what our parents have always told us, remember? You know, it's kind of more like that. It's like, that's why my family tells me. Or the way it's worded there, I kind of think of it that way. My family, I think mom and dad is better here too than my family. Like, she is literally saying tosan ya kasan, my mom and dad. Although the ya does kind of open it up to like my mom and dad and other people. So my family is not wrong. I just personally prefer my mom and dad, or my parents, or our parents, or whoever. Our elders might actually be a good translation of tosan ya kasan. So that's pretty much, yeah, their elders would tell them to stand tall and not deal with. Yeah, not talk back to. Not humor them. Not fight back. Not deal with jerks like these boys. Not deal with is a little vague, like, because to deal with somebody can mean to retaliate, but it can also mean to, like, associate with. So I'm personally not so sold on deal with, but it works overall. Patron B, Mom and Dad said that no matter what, we can't hit back. We should keep our heads high and not stoop to their level. So right now, Ayuru, you did the best you could. Yeah, the so right now part I think was just added in there to make more explicit that she's talking about, like, you did the best you could, like, right now. Like, what you just did, Ayuru, that was the best you could have done. It sounds a little weird. So right now, Ayuru, you did the best you could. You know, that could do with a little reworking. Mom and Dad said that no matter what, we can't hit back. I like we can't hit back for the wording there, instead of, like, not deal with. It's more explicit, and it's really more what they mean. Not fight back, actually, would probably be a little bit better. We should keep our heads high and not stoop to their level, I think is a really good translation of do to shite inasai. Anna yatsura aite ni suru na. Don't stoop to their level. Anna yatsura aite ni suru na. So to stoop to their level implies, like, that their level is low. They're bad people. And we're better than that. We're better than that. It really is that, like, that whole liberal, like, when they go low, we go high. It's like, yeah, where does that get you? More oppression. Anyway, small Sarah. That's why our parents told us to think before we speak and to not fight with them. So Ayuru, you did the right thing. I like so Ayuru, you did the right thing. I mean, it's not quite what she's saying. In Japanese, she's saying, like, you were amazing and brave, actually. Not you did the right thing. Yeah, think before we speak was nowhere in the original Japanese. I don't know. Oh, nani o iware yoga. That's probably what, yeah, small Sarah probably, like, kind of got that from that. No matter what you're said, think before we speak. Yeah, that's just wrong. Not fight with them is correct, but yeah, I think retaliate or hit back or fight back is a much better translation than fight with them. Okay, so that was the end of this episode. Be sure to tune in next week or the week after for the next episode of Let's Translate Light Novels, unless you're watching this much after I published it, in which case there probably already is the next episode. Yeah, so thank you to the patrons who participated in this video. If you want to join my Patreon and participate in these videos, there's going to be like 2 more months left of this. No, wait, there's going to be 3 more months left of this. So if you join my Patreon at the $12 level, it's not too late to participate, unless, of course, you're watching this after February, in which case it is too late to participate. And I'd like to give a special thanks to Greg, Lay, Henry Rooming, and Data Fox. See you next time!